simulation theory, UFOs, unidentified aerial phenomena, demonology, black magic, top scientists, CERN portals. Sounds exciting, right? Well, it is. It's also equally as frightening. And look who it is, Nathaniel Gillis. It's been quite a while, so I'm really glad to have this opportunity again with you. What have you been up to, my friend?
Oh, God, a little bit of everything. I'm still doing research in my field, necronetics. I'm starting my own platform called Parasymposia about my research. And it's been a pilgrimage. I don't know that I would say I'm getting answers, or at least the right answers. I think I'm getting the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, I hope that will be my contribution to the field one day.
Right on, man. Well, just the words sound like, medical fields on. Way to go. I like that. Yeah,
there we go.
Parapsychology, interdimensional galactic CERN portal openings is going to be this field. So cool, man. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's interesting because I was actually a few years ago when the guide stones, when somebody blew up the guide stones. Mm-hmm. Before that, I think it was the day before that, the CERN did this major experiment. And I thought to myself, oh, that's odd. So I came up with this hypothesis, just a cool live action role play, something that would be great for a movie or something, or a series. Mm-hmm. And I said, I wonder if they actually opened up some kind of portal and brought in some entities that decided to change things up. Because not only did the guide stones get blown up the next day, but a whole bunch of high level people ended up stuff happened, which, you can go back and look at the dates on that. But then I was doing some more research, and obviously you got to take everything with a grain of salt because the internet, it seems like there's so much stuff out there. And now with artificial intelligence, you got to do obviously your own research, folks. But there's these claims, according to the internet, that Dr. Astrid Stuckelberger, who's a scientist, basically made claims that CERN was opening portals and communicating with beings from other dimensions. And I thought, wow, mate, I'm not the only one thinking it. So I thought that was really interesting. And today we're going to get into the simulation theory, and the latest cutting edge research that Nathaniel has been doing also with people behind the scenes that, we'll leave that for a future date because we'll keep those people anonymous as of right now. But the cutting edge and the UFO phenomena, the ET, the interdimensional, and some of the mechanics behind it. So we're going to get into that today, folks. So I would say, hey, buckle up, Buttercup. And also I wanted to give a huge shout out to our sponsors. Our sponsor, Noble Gold Investments. So I don't know about you, but if you've been I keep track of precious metals, and I look at the price of gold and silver and platinum pretty much daily, but it's been doing really good. And a lot of people are like, Rex, I should have listened to you 4 or 5 years ago when you were saying, hey, think about converting your 401 or IRA into precious metals. Well, great opportunities right now. Now, there's obviously never any guarantees. So you look at what the big banks and the money funders and the hedge fund managers are doing. But let me ask you something. If you built up $100,000 or more in investments, do you really want all of it riding on the stock market? Think about it. Banks, billionaires, even entire countries are loading up on physical gold right now and silver. Why? Because when markets swing, real assets hold their value. That's why I want to tell you about Noble Gold Investments. They make it simple to own investment grade gold and silver, the same kind the big players are buying. You can actually hold it in your hands. You can put it safely in your retirement account, and you've worked hard to build your wealth. Isn't it time you protected it? Noble Gold is family owned, trusted by thousands, ranked #1 in gold IRAs 4 years in a row, A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. And their precious metal specialists are standing by to answer your questions and walk you through every step. Simple, safe, and easy. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com today. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. You can call them 1-877-646-5347. Let them know Rex from Leak Project sent you. They have free ebooks, and they're giving those out to Leak Project listeners. But also for qualifying conversions, you will be gifted the 10-ounce solid silver American flag bar. Just let them know the Leaf Project sent you. There may be something else that they're offering for Leaf Project listeners specifically. And wow, take advantage of that opportunity. All right, let's get into it, Nathaniel. What do you got for us, man?
A little bit of everything. A little bit of everything, Rex.
Okay.
You know, anybody that knows me and my research knows that early on in my research, I was doing investigations into demonology and realizing that whatever we were dealing with seemed to exist outside of reality. The implication, even of the paranormal phenomenon itself, is that we live in a carefully orchestrated, monitored, stage managed construct. And we only knew of that because we saw the presence of paranormality, the paranormal, interfacing with our species. Essentially, it was like the movie The Matrix when the black cat glitches over and over again. And one of the characters points to Neo, and you see that cat. Yeah, that should not be happening if this was a normal event. Because it's paranormal, it points to a glitch in the construct. And so that's where my research led me out of demonology and more into studying reality itself, the actual mechanics of the paranormal, not just the fact that it's happening. We've known that since millennia, since the dawn of recorded history. We've known something exists that's out there. There are bumps out in the night. And so the research I and others have been doing has been centered around understanding the underlying mechanics of the phenomenon. And what we're realizing is that once we knew how, then we knew why. And then that led us to understand when the phenomenon is incarnating. So it's interesting you mentioned Dr. Astrid, because her research in the CERN portal indicates something that many people are missing. And that is that esotericism is it's directly coordinated and connected to science. Whatever we're dealing with, these are not dichotomies. These are dualities. And the same mechanisms we're witnessing in science, CERN opening a portal here, we witnessed in times past in the skull experiment through ritual and esotericism. And so, to kind of give us context, in the 1990s, there was a group of parapsychologists that got together in Skull, England. They sat down and they designed a room. Now, people are going to say, Nathaniel, what is that? I'm not just talking about the structure of a room, the four walls of a door, but literally they sat around a table and they had implemented certain people in the room at the table strategically, scientists, parapsychologists, psychic mediums, and they would perform seances hoping to contact the other. Well, days go by, and finally they realized, okay, the phenomenon's not responding to us, so we're going to take this parapsychologist out and replace them with another. And they did that for months until finally they got what they call a successful room. At which point, my friend, the phenomenon began to demonstrate unique capabilities. The first of which was the phenomenon began to manifest a star system, a universe, cosmology above them in the room. So,
like
for your
literally?
listeners, literally. So, what they're witnessing, the lights are off, they're seeing like a universe, stars, solar systems hovering above them on the ceiling, above the ceiling.
That
And
reminds me of
then,
the first Ghostbusters.
yes, it's sick. It's incredible. And the problem is, again, here in the States, a lot of us Americans, we don't know a lot about that research because a lot of it has been bottled up in Europe, in England. But I have connections there, and I've had conversations with people. It's really, really fascinating stuff. But as they were performing their seances, slowly but surely, that, I don't know what you call it, a universe and cosmos, all of it began to slowly descend down, and finally it nestled upon the table, and now they're actively looking at this star system. And sure enough, in the middle of all the stars and all the planets and universes, a ball of light materializes And out of all the lights they're witnessing, it begins to move over the table. Then it projects a ball, another stream of light, a beam of light on the table. The beam of light stayed stationary the entire time, but the ball of light it came from kept moving around. So it's stationary. The ball of light, it's stationary. And so one of the individuals there, one of the members asks Robin Foy, the leader, and says, "Robin, do you mind if I try to capture the ball of light?" Said, "Sure, go ahead." So sure enough, this individual reaches out, captures the ball of light. It is in their hand, and now it's shooting the same beam of light through the cracks of their fingers, and it's going everywhere. And so at one point, the phenomenon was leading them through archetypes, right? Would you like to talk to a deceased ancestor or a deceased loved one? Someone would raise their hand and say, yes, okay, well, he is here. And they would communicate with that individual or entity, right? That wanted people to believe they were that individual, I should say. And then they went through, again, these various archetypes. And the second one, I believe, was deceased scientists. And we are deceased scientists. We want to assist you in your paranormal endeavors. And then finally, they contacted what's called the spirit team. And they had a spirit team themselves. And the spirit team, they kind of created this portal. Again, we're talking about, I think it was approximately 500 hours of this experiment took place just to get the room to this level of initiation. And at that particular moment, the phenomenon had created a portal between this dimension and that dimension. And it started to literally download and incarnate NHI. Now, in the States, at least to my knowledge, the only evidence I've seen of gray aliens in that experiment was Mr. Blue, where they were told to place a camera up, right, and leave it there, leave it on. They left the home, left the building. They come back the next day and they replay the recording and the video, and they see this gray alien, Rex, staring at them and into the camera. They called him Mr. Blue. But for the longest time here in the States, we only knew that was the singular manifestation of alien gray in that experiment. But it wasn't. By the time the phenomenon had led them through initiatory rites, through archetypes, it had taken that long to establish a portal. And by the time that took place, the phenomenon began to incarnate not tens, not dozens, hundreds of these beings began to fill that room. Now, what's interesting to note for those who are interested in the phenomenology of it, in the paranormal community, we've known of apparitions, we've known of guides, we've also known of alien grays. Now, what the phenomenon did in the skull experiment is particularly intriguing to me and others, because what it did is it collapsed all of the archetypes onto one entity. Now they had apparitions of alien grays. Not the whole bodies. Mostly it was just half the body. Apparitions of alien grays that were communicating to them. And one of them actually looked at a psychic medium and said, "I am your guide." Now, when this happened because they, quote, lost control of the room. What does that mean? Again, Nathaniel, what does that mean? That means that the individual channeling the phenomenon was overwhelmed by whatever this intelligence is. And she or they realized, I don't know what is incarnating in this room. There was an immense terror, by the way, a fear. And I'm not fear mongering, but I'm just telling you, it pilferated everything. And it was so piercing to them that, and I'm going to use quotes, that they performed what's called an e-stop, an emergency stop in the channeling session. The channeler had to cut off every single conscious tie with the phenomenon. Turn the lights on. We've got to stop this experiment. The reason they did that is because, number one, they realized that early on they were having good results, positive results, right? In fact, that's why 30% of the experiment has been published. The other 70% has been hidden behind closed doors. But here's the issue. The phenomenon led them by the hand, gave them the illusion of control, and by the time the archetypes of initiation led them through and to NHI, all hell broke loose. Whatever they were encountering is a lot like the Collins Elite model, not in terms of what they are, but in terms of origin. They existed outside of space and time. In fact, it wasn't just alien grays, it wasn't just ghosts and guides, but the phenomenon would actually create like small UFOs, small UAP in the seance. And it would begin to move, and they would see beings looking out from the ball of light at them during the experiments, Rex. My point, though, is the phenomenon demonstrated a unique pathology above and beyond everything it had already created for them and amongst them. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a newspaper materializes. Now, this is the 90s. The newspaper the phenomenon apported to them was from around the 1930s or 1940s. And at the point when they investigated it and had tests performed on it, the leading experts in that field said that whoever gave you this newspaper, even though it's 100 years old, right, or from the 1930s, 1940s, even though it's that old, it looks to have been just printed. The ink is fresh. The paper was just made. Whatever this is had just been created, and it's impossible because we're not using that same paper, we're not using the same printers, we're not using the same ink. So where did this newspaper come from? Well, what they decided to do was to take it and place it in a safe space. Leave it alone. We don't know what it is, where it came from. We know it's a newspaper, but we don't. Something gave it to us. So they left it alone for a day. They came back the next day and they realized that in 24 hours, that newspaper had aged over 50 days in 24 hours. So they realized that there is a time differential between where the paper came from and where it came to. It was given to us from something outside of this reality. Now, these apports, again, in early parapsychology, apports were just contributed to mindless, unguided processes, just like poltergeist activity, right? It's the trickster archetype. No, it's not. The phenomenon is doing things in our reality, and we're seeing the remnants of it, trying to pick up the missing pieces to understand the mechanics behind it. Even CERN, Dr. Astrid, we'll go back to her for a fleeting moment. She has discussed about entities coming through the portals that they have created. Now, what most people don't know is that they've also created a portal and they've taken mice and put them through the portal. They'll wait 5 minutes and pull them back, and that mouse would have aged years. So they're trying to break the construct. But my point is, the research I and others are doing is we're realizing slowly but surely that the paranormal phenomenon itself is an indication that we are interfacing with entities that do not belong in our reality. They're from something else, somewhere else. And when we do, in fact, interface with them, most of the time they cannot hold their shape for long. They have to anchor themselves to certain objects, right? And they have archetypes that they will interface as. And so what this points to is not just a construct on the left hand, but on the right hand, it points to the fact that we have compartmentalized this thing. We've said we've got a bunch of ologies in our minds, thinking this is all separate phenomena. And the plausibility, the most plausible and probable explanation is that that has been propaganda on the part of the phenomenon. It doesn't want us to link these different fields because it knows that if we actually sat down with the question and said, okay, why are we finding reports in hauntology and in demonology if these are separate phenomena? Why are we finding sigils on experiencers of abduction, but also sigils on demoniacs? That should not be happening. Aliens, extraterrestrials, should not be carving sigils on the bodies of abductees. Now, if it is happening, which it is, by the way, it's irrefutable. I have the case studies and the photographic evidence. If that is the case, and it is, then it's possible that the paranormal field itself may not really be what we think it is. It may be, again, all of us are staring at glitches in the matrix, the ultimate black cat, and saying that should not exist. Why does it exist? And how is it existing in our reality?
I want to hear more about this Mr. Blue.
Yeah.
What experiment was that?
This is the skull experiment in the 1990s, where they were told to place a camera in a certain room and to leave it alone. Leave it alone. And so they did. They ended
their skull.
Yes, SCOLE. And they set up their tripod, pressed record, ended the session for the night. They get back up to the next day and they replay the video footage. And the reason the phenomenon wanted them to set up the tripod to press record on the camera is so that they could walk up the alien grade to the camera itself. And now you literally see, there's footage of it. You literally see this entity looking at the camera. So, but what are we dealing with? And again, it's not good enough for me. I've been in this field for a while. So have my colleagues. My colleagues have been in this longer than I've been alive. So it's like, okay, what are we really dealing with? Ufology's gotten so far. Hauntology's gotten so far. Demonology has gotten, far less, in distance. But is it possible, again, that the phenomenon is diversifying its identity in our eyes? Right? I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. Up until when we actually interface with it, we're finding that all of these archetypes are present at the same place at the same time. The same demon that's sigilizing the skin of a demoniac is the same extraterrestrial that's placing Theban alphabet on the skin of abductees. That should not be taking place if these are separate phenomena. Shouldn't. The fact is, it is. It is taking place. And so now what my colleagues and I are doing are sitting down with the question and saying, okay, let's put all the cards on the table. Forget about what we've been told. What can we prove? What is the evidence? And the evidence suggests, it points to the fact that we are being interfered with and interfaced with a species that is not from this dimension, not extraterrestrial. And I'm not saying they don't exist, by the way, but I'm saying a majority of what we're dealing with is interdimensional. And we need to understand the mechanics behind that. I don't want to, if there's some questions, I want to answer those. If not, I can keep going, Rex.
No, please keep going. What I'm thinking about is, hold on a second. Let me see if I can bring us back both up here. Yeah. Did you know that Mr. Blue is also the alien in Resident Alien, that comedy TV series? And
oh, that's hilarious, by the way. Absolutely hilarious, right? Remember when he's like, this man's been dead for 5 days, and the guy wakes up? Rex, I was dying. But yeah, you're right.
It makes me wonder. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that they must have known about these experiments, and because a lot of times TV shows and movies, they'll take stuff that's actually happened or stuff that's in the conspiracy realm sometimes and put it into a film or a TV series. But so they did these experiments, these skull experiments. I hadn't heard about it until you brought it up, and then I've been doing a little bit of research as you're talking, just so I can. And there's a book actually out called the Skull Report. 300 pages.
Right. Is that Robert Foy's book, by the way?
Arthur Ellison, Montague Keen, and David Fontana.
Yeah, I believe they were the parapsychologists involved. You know, a lot of things happen in the skull experiment, a lot of them. And at the very end, a book was written in the middle of the skull experiment. And the data that was presented was super benevolent, love and light. What happened was that at the very end of it, the phenomenon turned really malevolent on them. And the hitchhiker or hijacker effect began to manifest in their lives, destroying virtually everything and everyone. And so there was a conscious decision that was made. We already have a book out. We already have data out there saying that the skull experiment was benevolent, right? And everything was great. We don't want to mess up that legacy by saying, hey, listen, maybe some things that came through were not good for our species. But dealing with this aspect of a port, again, the idea within parapsychology, even with the poltergeist activity, this is mindless, unguided processes. This is just the trickster archetype. The phenomenon is just incarnating objects for whatever reason. And that was pretty much the consensus within demonology. When you're seeing, these demoniacs, of possessed individuals, the phenomenon would apport objects in the room with them during exorcisms. And the priests would be like, okay, they would collect them, of course, Father Amorth would collect them and place them in a sacred space. But that was the extent of their phenomenology. It was essentially, okay, yeah, the phenomenon manifested something. Okay, that's interesting. We're never going to investigate it. We're not going to look more into it because it's evil. But, one of my dear friends is Steve Mera and Barry Fitzgerald, and their research into apports is incredible. It's the best I've seen, because what we're looking at again are mechanisms, not just how, but why. What is the phenomenon doing with this stuff? It's very, very useful. Like, it knows what it's doing. It doesn't waste energy. It doesn't waste anything. So what is it doing? And so you get back to Steve Mayer and Barry Fitzgerald's research. They were in malevolent hauntings where the phenomenon was really doing bad things to good people. And they were having like cases where the phenomenon would remove objects from a house, right? For instance, a family had a series of 3 or 4 coffee mugs, and they were their favorite coffee mugs. And one of the coffee mugs goes missing. And family calls Steve and Barry. Okay, we don't know where it is. We've had this for years. It never goes missing. We have a small, whatever. We knew we would know where it was. If it was missing, we'd find it. Well, we can't find it anyway. We've looked everywhere. And so they concluded that the phenomenon had deported one of the coffee mugs. And so they're waiting around, and they have tremendous, profound experience with this kind of phenomenon. And they said, we're going to wait around and see what happens. And sure enough, the family calls them back maybe a week or two later. Hi, guys. No worries. Everything's kosher. We're all good. The phenomenon or whatever, we found the coffee mug. We found the coffee mug. So Steve's like, let's go have an experiment. Let's go make an experiment. We're going to do something with this. It's not just the phenomenon's giving them back their mug. The phenomenon's up to something, and we want to know what it is. So they sent the coffee mug to a laboratory, along with what's called a control, which is another coffee mug from the series, the group that it was purchased in the box. And the isotopic ratio of the coffee mug they gave to the family was different than the coffee mug they took from it.
That is weird.
It changed. So then what's actually going on? And so they went deeper with their research, and they thought, well, was that even the same coffee mug? Or was it the phenomenon replacing that coffee mug with a replica of one that looked enough to fit into our reality, but would also serve the purpose of the phenomenon itself. So what are we dealing with? So they went through their research, were doing more investigations, and they had another case study where husband and wife were arguing, and one of them was looking down, and this figurine was moving. And one of them decides, in anger, a fit of anger, takes it, throws it out the front door, and it shatters. They look around, they shut the door, they walk back into the house, and Rex, it's right back on the table they just took it from. Couldn't be. It existed. It occurred. And so they didn't know what was going on. Like, I must be tripping. I have to be hallucinating here. I vividly remember taking that figurine in my hands and throwing it into 1,000 pieces. Yet when I walk back into the house, it's put back together again, and it's right back on the table I took it from. What is going on? These are glitches in the matrix. The phenomenon is infiltrating this reality, and we as a species are seeing it as paranormal. That's paranormal. Why is it paranormal? Because the phenomenon made the mistake of replicating something too soon and placing that object right where it was taken before. What is going on? Now, these are mechanisms. These are mechanisms. So once again, they were presented with a third case. And they finally decided, like, Stephen Barry, like, there's something wrong with this. Like, we just can't put our finger on it. We're going to run another test. We're going to test the phenomenon. And this is when I'm going to introduce you guys to a terminology I've created, the learning matrix. It's a part of necronetics, but it's called the learning matrix. They go into the house, they take an apport because the phenomenon had materialized something in the house. The family said, I don't know what that is, doesn't belong here. So they take it from the home. A day later, they get a phone call from one of the spouses that says, okay, guys, I want to thank you for everything you've done for our family. We've had massive success. You guys are the best paranormal team we've seen. Why is that, Mr. Smith or Sister Smith or Mrs. Smith? It's because the phenomenon has dissipated. Paranormal activity it's no longer here. Your services are no longer needed. Thank you so much. Barry and Steve are thinking, what's going on? There's no way the phenomenon just left instantly just because we removed an object from the house. So they realized that the phenomenon was triangulating, Rex. It's triangulating. It was still trying, again, even with the skull experiment, trying to download a program. It could not now because the apport had been removed from the home. Sure enough, the next day they said, okay, we want to give you back the object. We're going to test the phenomenon with your permission. Sure. Okay. What's going to happen? We're going to replace it. Here it is. We took the apport to a storage space. It's back in your home again. And they sat back and watched, Rex. The phenomenon that had been triangulating for the last day or two instantly connected to that apport and began to incarnate in that home. So the problem is that the phenomenon is replacing real objects with replicas from their dimension. And the deeper issue is we don't even know how many of them exist in this reality. It could be a cloud. It could be a car. It could be a person. What literally we're looking at is something more akin to a program that will simulate portions of reality in order to apport and connect to our dimension. Now, we've seen this. A lot of this research is dark, but we've seen aspects of this, even unintentionally. We've seen these same phenomena and mechanisms in demonology. But because we compartmentalized the phenomenon, we said horns and hooves, hauntings, didn't realize what we were looking at. See, the whole object of doing the investigation within hauntings, right, even with Barry and Steve's cases, was the family did not want the phenomenon there, okay? Did not want the phenomenon there. In order to remove it, they tried to remove objects from the house. Well, the phenomenon was triangulating. It did not want to dispossess the home. So I got to thinking one day, and I thought, man, like, you ever had, like, Rex, you ever had something on the tip of your tongue and you're like, I know it, but I just don't know how. And I don't even know what I know. I just know something. And sure enough, I finally got on the phone with Steve and I said, Steve, I got a problem. He goes, what? I said, I've heard of apports, but not in the hauntology, not in that context. And so I got back into my books on demonology, Malachi Martin, Father Amorth, Gabriel Amorth, and even, demonologists and exorcists in the medieval period. So my point is, I got to their cases, Rex, and it blew my mind because they were facing the same mechanism. Okay? For instance, Father Amorth had a case study where an individual was possessed. Okay, the phenomenon had commandeered their biological avatar. We're talking about levitation, we're talking about voices, just really, really dark stuff. But at the point of exorcism, like when the phenomenon was being forced out of that individual, it demonstrated a profound pathology. It began to regurgitate objects out of thin air. The possessed individual was given apports. Objects they had not swallowed, had not eaten, began to materialize out of their mouth and into this dimension. The priests and exorcists knew what to do with it. They just thought, what? So they would take these objects, place them in a sacred space, and leave them alone. And here's what's interesting. And they were told never to touch them. Don't touch them. Why? Because the phenomenon is with them. Why is the phenomenon with them? Because it's the same mechanism, the same pathology. It will materialize objects that's anchored to the phenomenon. And the phenomenon will have that placed in our reality. And it's attached to themselves. Materialized objects. And I'll go a step deeper. Replicas of objects, where the phenomenon is taking things and replacing them with something that looks identical to them, but isn't. It is from the phenomenon. Go a step further, Nathaniel. Thank you. I will. Dr. Carla Turner had a case study where the phenomenon abducted a female. Oh, man. This is going to get me in trouble. Abducted a female and said, if you do not comply, look over there in the corner. If you don't comply, just go look. She looks over in the corner and there is a replica of her on a table. A copy of her body. And she said, well, what is that? Like, what are you telling me? They said, well, if you do not comply with us, we are going to take you and we're going to return that in your place. And nobody will know the difference. So my question is, how much of reality has been replicated by the phenomenon? How much of reality have we interfaced with thinking that's natural, that's normal, and it's not, it's paranormal? And the only reason we're even asking this question is because there have been glitches in the learning matrix to where the program had a difficult time downloading or uploading, and there was a glitch, and we see it and say, that shouldn't happen. Why shouldn't it happen? Because it's evidence of a construct. I've even had cases of abductions, abductee, who the entities began to take her as a child, Rex, but when they did take her, they always appeared as her favorite cartoon or her favorite comic book character. Now, she grew up, but it had been years since she was taken. And so when they moved into her room, she said, I felt this energy. And she said it was very familiar. I knew what I was feeling. I got very tensed up and prepared myself to be taken by these entities. She says, all of a sudden, this cartoon character, about 3 feet tall, walks up to me. And she's like, Nathaniel, she goes, now I'm towering over it. And I'm realizing this cannot possibly be a cartoon. But what is it then? It had replicated a cartoon in order to interface with her. And this gets back again into the learning matrix that is employed during what I have termed interface events, where we are interfacing with either a UAP or an entity. And what happened was when she started to cognitively say, yeah, you're definitely not that cartoon, Rex, the entity had to adapt to her belief. It got to a point where it realized somewhere in the learning matrix, it realized, okay, this mask, this incarnation I'm wearing, it's not working. And so she said in real time, the entity got very close to her. Its eyes got bigger and they began to move like this. And she said, Nathaniel, I'm not crazy. She goes, it's going to sound crazy, but I'm not. She said, it was measuring my belief in its image. Even though she knew it's not a cartoon, it wanted her to believe it was, and even appeal to a learning matrix to figure out was she 60% believing in it or 40%? Like, what do I have to do here? How much do you believe in this? And then again, it tries to improvise. So what they do is they'll go and appeal to the learning matrix. They'll try to pull information and download. And when they can't, all bets are off. Most of the time, the interface event changes and they're gone. What is that? The same mechanism of apports that we're seeing in hauntology, we're seeing in demonology for the same reason. The phenomenon doesn't want to dispossess the home, the vessel, the person. So it will create replications of reality to attach itself to. What is it? Well, when the demoniac's coughing up objects, that phenomenon is attaching it to itself to them because it doesn't want to leave. So what are we dealing with here? We have the same triangulation occurring, not just at interface events, but even with apports, where the phenomenon will think, it will evolve, it will mature into what it wants to do next. And so all of this points back to the possibility, I should say again, that we're living in a construct. In whatever we're dealing with, even with apports, even with the apported newspaper, the mouse that's being given to them and back to us, there is a time and space differential present. And we're not even sure that these abductees are returning even when they come back. It's very, very disturbing. I can go even longer, brother. I'm just, you know me.
So I'm thinking of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I'm thinking of They Live. And I'm wondering if this phenomena can replicate objects and people and animals.
All bets are off, Rex. All bets are off, bud. I know where you're going.
Like, would it not potentially abduct and replicate very high level people so that it can, I mean, what's the end game? What's the goal? Is it technology?
What's the goal?
Do we
control of our reality? Now, here's what we're dealing with. We're not just the phenomenon cannot just replicate reality. It will control our perception of it. And we have cases, like there was one case of a colonel that was abducted, I think it was from the Pentagon. And he was gone for a whole day, Rex. And they're guarded. The building's guarded. His office is guarded. And he never left the office. He was not on camera, never left. Now, watch this. They walked into the office, gone. Right? The next day they come back, the phenomena have replaced him, or should I say, returned him. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a control system, as Jacques Vallée put it, where the phenomenon will interface with us. It will enter the artificial habitat, will not want to be seen. And if it is seen, it will try to blend in to the artificial habitat. I'm Dear Aunt Edna. I'm a guide, right? And sometimes there are glitches to where we who are in the construct, those of us who are within the artificial habitat, will say, I know that looks like a rock, but that's not a real rock, right? Or it looks like a coffee mug, but once we tested it, it wasn't the same mug. So what's actually going on here, we're witnessing in real time the phenomenon from the other side, apporting objects, replacing reality with itself. And there are those within the government, in the field, that know this. In behind closed doors, what do we do? What do we do with this? Now, the latest whistleblower, Matthew Brown, has referred to this in an interview and on his tweets or his X posts, where he refers to, again, what's called angel magic or Enochian magic. Again, his handle on X is son of a Brahmin. Again, we're back into esotericism, whether we like it or not. We're back into esotericism and ritual magic. And in one of the interviews, he goes, yeah. He goes, here's the deal. We live in a construct. Then he mentions the fact that others have left the construct. What is he talking about? They know. They know. I mean, even let's go down this little rabbit hole real quick. If we really want to know how much control the phenomenon has over reality, not just our perception of reality, over reality, you look no further than Professor Renee Hardy. So a little bit after, about a few years after Albert Bender was performing, or not performing rituals, but had an altar in his attic and was trying to commune with the phenomenon, looking for disclosure. Not long after that, in the 1970s, there was a group of scientists independent from each other who were approaching ufology and the paranormal as a whole through the lens of science. I believe I'm trying to study this through the scientific method. It's very probable or possible that we're dealing with extraterrestrials. And so most of them are academics. And so one by one, Rex, what they would do is some of them, they were in different careers, in different stages at least. What they would do is they'd say, okay, I studied this for a decade. I'm going to come out with my book about all my conclusions regarding this. And I'm going to tell you, it's not what I thought it was at all. It's more interdimensional. It's more ultra-terrestrial. And we are being governed over by something else. One by one, Rex, they were found gone. Okay? Wink, wink. And it was believed that they did this to themselves. One by one. The night before, look at the odds here, guys. Rex, the night before the book was released, the night before Professor Renee Hardy was going to go out and release his paper, his thesis, to be peer-reviewed regarding the phenomenon, once again, gone. The family whole, again, all of the families of these people, again, these were academic savants. Many of it, like Professor Renee Hardy, I think he had like 200 different patents. He was a savant. But all of their families came to their defense and said, no, they would not do this, especially at this point in their career. They were about to release the most controversial model of the phenomenon yet. And they had all the evidence to back it up, Rex. And next thing you know, their papers are gone. Their thesis is removed. And so are they. Professor Renee Hardy, same case. Okay. Now, he's gone. They go to the funeral. His colleagues are there. His family's there from out of state and out of country. And in the pregnant silence, just before the first note of the piano is played, the back doors creak open, and in walk 6 very tall, thin, suited men. They sit down. Everybody turns around, by the way. Everybody notices them. They sit down, Rex. At the conclusion of the funeral, they're shaking hands, talking to people. People are meeting them, touching them, smelling their cologne, looking at their gel in their hair. At the very end of the funeral, as families do, they went back to the home and they're grieving. But in the middle of their grief, they're talking. Wasn't it good to see Aunt Betty? Yeah, and Jonathan, it was good to see Jonathan come in from New York. I'm glad he made the flight. One of them chimes in. By the way, wasn't that strange how, right before the funeral started, those guys walked in. There was this weird, creepy feeling to them. By the way, did you ever get their name? I didn't get their name. Did you? No, I don't think they ever gave it. That's very weird. You know what? I would like to. We're going to figure out who they are. So they went back to the camera, Rex. You took a picture of them, right? Yeah, I remember it vividly. We took a picture of them, and I know Sue, like she was filming the funeral, so you know what I mean. Has to be Rex. They were never even on camera. They never showed up on camera, not video. They're not. What? So, what are we dealing with here? Again, we're dealing with a phenomenon that will control our perception of it. And if and when, like, okay, in the Matrix, they see a black cat. Well, here's what the phenomenon does. Did you really see a black cat? Don't tell anybody. And if you do tell somebody, well, how do you know that memory even existed? Right? And so the phenomenon will actively, again, we're dealing with the learning matrix. It will interface with us. And then imply the fact that we can't even trust what we saw. Dr. Carla Turner, another case study of hers, a family eating at a barbecue, Memorial Day or Labor Day, whichever one. I think it's 4th of July, actually. And they have a bunch of family and neighbors over. As they're eating barbecue, they look across the street. There is a UAP hovering over a home. Isn't that your house, Tony? It is my house. Oh, my God. What are we going to do? This experiencer said, Dr. Turner, by this time she's shaking because she's realizing, oh my God, what are we dealing with? She goes, Dr. Turner, she goes with the whole story. We're looking at this UAP for 45 minutes. We're looking at it. All of us noticed it. We're all looking at this craft. She's like, and I even pulled out binoculars, and we gave, everybody was looking through binoculars. It went through the whole line. Everybody's looking at this object in the sky. She goes, and I even got my telescope out. For 30, 45 minutes, we're staring at this object with my telescope. Right? That's the person saying, I saw the black cat. Something didn't add up, should not belong here in this reality, yet it did. We're studying it. What's going on? And so Dr. Turner and she's amazing. So she goes, well, I don't understand this. Like, so it's, you saw UAP. That is disturbing. We don't know what's going on, but we're trying to stop it. The individual says, Dr. Turner, that's not really what's going on. That's not why I'm talking to you. Dr. Carla Turner goes, well, what do you mean? Like, what's the issue? She goes, Dr. Turner, I vividly remember looking through binoculars. I remember my family members and neighbors looking through binoculars. I don't own binoculars. She said, Dr. Turner, after the event, I went home, slept on it, woke up, went to bed, woke up the next day, and my telescope was still packaged in the unopened box it came in. So the phenomenon protects itself. It evolves. It interfaces through archetypes. What we are looking at may not even be people as much as programs. There is a learning matrix present. And I'm starting to believe, as well as others I'm working with, that yes, if it could replace objects, maybe it could replace people. If it can actually interface with us and fulfill all of our senses, We smell the cologne. We smell the hair gel and hairspray. We feel the flesh. We can touch the hand. We shake their hands. And yet maybe they never existed at all. It's Nick Redfern's research, where the men in black show up at a home. The family, the grieving families, talking to them, and they're men in black, but they're telling the family that their son was in the war and he's not coming back. And oh, by the way, can we go down and look inside? And they're gone. Doesn't make sense. So where I know there's that, I guess, if I could summarize, is that it does appear to be a construct. And again, not to beat a dead horse, if it could replace things. Rex, we've had cases where UAP have landed in a bed of trees, and when the UAP disappears, so do the trees, Rex. So do the trees. The investigators go back out, look at the soil, and there's no root system in the soil, Rex. So it appears to be a program, my friend.
You know what song I'm thinking of?
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Machine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where it's rendering itself. Again, the learning matrix, it gets to a certain point. Okay, even with cryptozoology, one of my dear friends is Paul St. Clair, and he's had cases where you'll have an entity that appears to be a cryptid, right? It's a bipedal wolfman. The only problem is you'll see glitches in the learning matrix where you'll have people in a car driving 45, 50 miles an hour. That entity's barely moving, but it's going 50 miles an hour. Why? It's trying to blend in with reality, but it's glitching. Now, we've had cases of cryptids where even the food source to which that entity would live off of doesn't exist in that environment. Why? Because it's not real. It's a glitch in the learning matrix. And the more research we do with this kind of stuff, the more dangerous it gets, because again, we're pushing against this simulation. Oh.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool research.
Yeah, it's different than what I'm used to. Yeah. Well, people, again, I've been highlighted as a demonologist, and that's fair. My first show is Coast to Coast. It's like 3 million people now know me as a demonologist. I can't not be that. When I get booked on shows, they're booking me because of that. And admittedly, that was most of my research. But hopefully people will understand this is new stuff. It's at least a new angle. But yeah, Rex, I'm finding Theban alphabet on abductees. What? So there's a lot of this, again, that in the field, many people have said, okay, it's either science or spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not. Whatever we're dealing with has infused both. And we may even, in necronetics at least, there does seem to be a portion of these beings, and this is just my theory, that are formerly human practitioners of the occult. And it may possibly even, it's a mouthful, I know, that may even be who Matthew Brown's referring to when he's referring to Enochian magic and people who have ascended and left the construct.
So what do you think of the Enochian magic and the calls?
I don't do them. I wouldn't recommend them. I know people believe it's a mind science, and that's fair enough. I do believe, again, to invoke these entities can be very costly, very costly. And in my research, when you were dealing with archetypes of the phenomenon, it's almost like they are initiating us through these archetypes. I know of one experiencer specifically who was being guided by his guides. Literally, they said, we're your guides for 30, 50 years. And then to his astonishment, he started suffering from PTSD, goes to see Dr. Carla Turner, Barbara Bartholic, right? And under memory regression, he realizes that beings took him at a young age, did some really bad things, and so he goes back to his guides, Rex, the guides that had been giving him insight for the last 60 years of his life. And Rex, they weren't there. They had nothing to say. They cut off all communication. And so what I'm looking at here again is that we may be looking at an intelligence that has diversified its identity in our eyes. And so it'll initiate us through archetypes. The same thing with scroll experiment. It went through a methodical process with them. Okay, you're going to interface with this one, right? Until we create that level of connection, that much more of a portal with you. Incomplete, but that's why we have to introduce the other archetype with you. Now you're going to continue interfacing with the phenomenon. And by the time they had interfaced with all of the archetypes, the phenomenon began to download the real program in their midst. And whatever that was the proto-intelligence. Whatever that was, had no archetype, Rex. It had it was pathogenic, and it destroyed lives. Absolutely destroyed lives. And we've not just seen that in demonology, we've seen that in parapsychology. Dr. Barry Taft, Steve Mera, virtually everybody in that field. They realize that once you have a house, and I've had this in my own cases, you have a house full of activity, you'll kick the phenomena out of that house. Next thing you know, it's across the street. So when it downloads in this reality, it will splinter. It'll go everywhere as long as it can, right? And we're looking at the phenomenon replicating itself so it can prolong its existence in this dimension. Now, the implications are harrowing. It's indigestible, again, because if the phenomenon can create a physiological construct, Rex, something that blends into our reality and fulfills all of our sensory awarenesses, then how much of this is even real? Is this also, right, a part of the phenomenon itself? And again, are we really just studying parts, glitches of the matrix, whatever this is? Still looking for vocabulary. But is it possible the only reason we know of that is because that which wants to appear as a desk sometimes can't really fully render in time, and we catch it out of the corner of our eye. We see it. Now, if that's not real and it wants to be, it feels real. Is this real? That's where we're at.
Well, if you look at it that way, everything's real. It's just a different perception of reality. Mm-hmm. We see 0.01% of the electromagnetic light spectrum, and our brain filters out about half of that. So,
exactly.
Wi-Fi works, Bluetooth works. We don't see it, but it works.
Right. So there's something here. There's something here. And this is what I've been telling people, because, like I get emails all the time. I'm like, okay, do you appeal to the extraterrestrial hypothesis? And my thing is, I'm not saying they don't exist. That would be ignorant. I should get out of the field if I say that, right? The universe is huge. But whatever we're dealing with, it is outside of space and time. And it has the ability not just to manipulate our perception of reality. What appears to be going on is that when they manipulate reality and we see it, they'll manipulate our perception of them manipulating reality. They actually did this, right? But they don't want you going home and telling people about it. That's the point of, oh yeah, something did exist over the home with Dr. Connor Turner's case. The problem is it wanted to manipulate their perception of the entire encounter, because if she can't even trust the fact, right, that I saw it with binoculars, but I don't own binoculars, then how can I trust anything about your account? That's the point of it all. How can you trust it, right? That's the whole point. And again, it's indicative of entities coming into the artificial habitat. When we see them, when they don't want to be seen, when they shouldn't be seen, they will incarnate an archetype that fits into our reality or tries to, right? And even sometimes it's not fully rendered. So that's really what we're dealing with. And Anyways, that's a whole nother show, brother. But thank you for having me on, man. It's I've never done a live with you before, and so this is a monumental event for old Nate.
Dude, yeah. So some people now are like, they're going to keep their light on at night. They're going to sleep with the Bible under the bed. The crucifix on the wall. Makes me think of that song, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And it brings up a whole new thought process. If you look at it in the term of interdimensional, these whatever's making contact, it seems like they've been making contact for a long time, potentially thousands of years, and time might be different in a different dimension. Time itself, some people believe to be the fourth dimension, depending on what your
God
is.
All right, let's go down this rabbit hole for a fleeting moment. Time is different there. And it's not just an accident that abductees say, okay, I was taken for 30 minutes, but it was really 6 hours. I've had cases like that. So what we're looking at least right now, my colleagues and I are looking at the fact that it's not just our imagination, that we are being taken to that dimension. And because there's a time differential there, we're being taken back. Time is different over there than it is here. Right? Not just that, this will really keep people up. But whatever they're doing in that dimension appears to be ritual magic. That we have data for. How? Because, again, now this is somewhat old research, which people may or may not be familiar with us. But I had a case study of a remote viewer, again, who was pulled into that dimension, out of the body. He was doing one of his reading sessions. He's out of his body. It was your basic UFO abduction account, right? He's in a metallic room. These entities are lined up, flanking him on the right and left sides. And he starts to realize, Rex, this isn't what I thought it was. This is not what I signed up for, right? And he's looking at these entities, and finally the entity shapeshifted. And according to his son, he said, my dad is basically stumbling down the stairs, and his dad has a massive heart attack. Now, his dad's the remote viewer, by the way. His dad has a massive heart attack. When EMS are ripping off his shirt to start doing compressions and revive him and everything, Rex, here we go. From underneath the skin, subdermal scarifications, subdermal sigils begin to move themselves from underneath the skin to the surface. The sigils. So they took him out of his body into that dimension, performed a ritual on that man, and when he got back into his body from underneath the skin, the sigils began to move themselves through the 3 stages of sigilization. What are we dealing with? I'll tell you what, in my perspective, it is exactly, it's not quite the simulation, it's a construct. But a lot of these people who are being taken by these entities are being performed upon. Rex, we have cases where the individual thought they were taken by extraterrestrials. That's the archetype, right? They're alien grays. But when we've put an ultraviolet light on them, we're finding sigils on their skin. Now, here we go. They went to work with sigils, didn't know they had them on. Went to school with sigils, had no idea. And they're thinking abduction by extraterrestrials, not realizing that these are Theban script, Theban iconography. So what do we do with that? Because we have no real word to articulate and quantify that model of the phenomenon. It would be something outside of space and time that's taking people, performing ritual magic on them, and then placing them back in this reality. And we think, okay, that's cool. No big deal. Love and light, extraterrestrial. These are just our friends and our guides. So that's where I'm at right now, where it's like, okay, why are we discovering that? Like, that should not be there. Like, I should not go to Blockbuster Video and find a video from Hollywood Video. Right? So what's really going on? I really can't tell you. I can tell you what the data says. Yes, yes, Utah Spice, you've nailed it. You've nailed it. And can I go ahead and rant for a second? There is a narrative right now in ufology that wants to obfuscate that truth. They don't want it out. They don't want it out. Okay, right now, I'm in contact with people that are from Brazil. They're Brazilian researchers, okay? They know that in the Virginia case, right? Oh, it's a crashed UAP and aliens. They know locally that in that environment, that manifestation took place because an occultist went out into the forest, built an altar, and performed a ritual. Next thing you know, the portal was created in many entities incarnated, not just the alien. But over here in the States, people are like, okay, it's just the alien. Wasn't at all. So I think this
go back 10 seconds. You said performed a ritual and then the video cut off.
Okay. Performed a ritual on an altar. And I know this because I know people that live there, Rex. I know them. And they said everybody, all the locals, they all know that that was the result of a successful ritual performed by a magician or a mage. And the end result was the incarnation of entities. And that what we're seeing here in the States, again, it's like, okay, we're only going to tell you this part of the story, and it was only extraterrestrials that manifested. That's not true either. That extraterrestrial was accompanied by other entities. And so what's frustrating about this to me, and it's just like, okay, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it, right? Let's not hide these facts. And if someone were to say, okay, Nathaniel, like, what would this mirror? Like, what model of the phenomenon would it mirror? This would be not the Collins elite model in terms of its fundamentalism, right? But it would be exactly what they discovered. There's a species in the afterlife. What is that? That's performing ritual magic, okay, on experiencers. And they know it. They know it, Rex. Here's how they know it. Because when they're getting put back in their bodies, the phenomenon is going through 3 stages of sigilization. And it's following earthly occultism. That is a key indicator to me of who we may be dealing with. Earthly philosophies, earthly theories, and earthly rituals in another dimension.
Wow. That's what I'm talking about. I need some organic popcorn now, dude.
Yes, yes.
Organic, though, non-GMO.
Organic, yeah, no doubt.
I'll tell you what is GMO, though, is some of these experiments. Like, you should read the comments. People are enthralled, man. They're enthralled.
Thank you. I love Leak Project. I love you, Rex. I love Leak Project. It's been so long, and the problem with me, man, is I've done hundreds of shows. And so when you do that many shows, like, you try not to be touched on the same things. So dealing with sigilization, it's following an occultist theory. His name was Austin Osman Spar, and he believed that the body can go through 3 stages of sigilization. It will absorb the sigil, activate it, and then expel it. And so what appears to be happening is that when people are returned, they're not aware that they were performed upon. Again, they're not aware. The phenomenon hides it. And then when we researchers get to them, like Father Sinister Avamino, okay, he gets back. Okay, this is an incubi literature. He gets back to an experiencer, and he's in there within an hour of the phenomenon manifesting, Rex. And here we go. He finds that an entity left secretions. Number 2, they found sigils underneath the eyelids of the experiencer, Rex. She didn't even know they were there. Every time she closed her eyes, she's staring at the branding of a sorcerer, of an entity. And so all of this, I found sorcery, or whatever we want to call this. I don't really care what we call it. I found it in ufology, demonology everywhere, everywhere. So, and I guess I'll back up and just slow down here. But that's where that's where the research is right now. And it's hard to quantify because nobody wants to tell someone, hey, by the way, imagine that, Rex. Okay. Okay, yeah. What do you think happened to you? Well, it's an extraterrestrial. Okay, here's the ultraviolet light. Sure. You got Theban iconography all over your arm. What in the world are we dealing with here? Because it doesn't appear to be what we were taught it was at all. They do things for their reasons, and they want to be in control of everything.
Welcome to Earth. It's a wild ride. Have fun. Enjoy it. Wow, man. What an experience. I'll tell you, it sure is fun to talk with you, Nathaniel. And
Thanks,
if you would, for our audience, like, is there a regular place to see your research and your work, or you need to find you doing different podcasts?
I'm going to be slowing down on the podcast scene. I love who I've done shows with. Obviously, I love everybody. And I have a few scheduled for the rest of the year. I'm doing my own platform now. It's called Para Symposia. And it's you can have a membership or not. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get my content either way. But, for years, people wanted me to start my own thing. And so I am. And, it'll help me do my research and support the books I'm buying and everything. But the website is parasymposia.com. And you can sign up for the newsletter and early access and everything there. But other than that, you guys can find me on my Instagram page. That's where I'm at on my social media. But thank you so much, guys, for having me on. It's always been a pleasure, Rex. I think you were one of the very first shows that really had me on and believed in my work. And here we are 6 years later, my friend.
Yeah. Even better looking and more important.
Well, speak for yourself, brother. I got kind of chubby. Too many chicken wings in football.
That's good, man. That's good. You're bulking up for weight.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna call it. I'm bulking up, brother.
Totally. I get that, man. I've been riding my bike a lot, so I've like a crazy maniac. So people are like, Rex, you look like you lost a few pounds. I'm riding my bike over 100 miles a week. Man. But anyway, so I just wanted to show off I think this is your website right here. Let me know if this is it. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom. Is this you right here?
That is me, brother. That is me. Now side note for everybody that's watching. So my work on necronetics is centered around the self-replication of this species we've been talking about today. And there have been a lot of people that wanted to buy the lecture series, Rex, right? Like, oh, do this. I'll, buy it. But the problem is, if they buy the lecture series, like on a big platform, you know what I mean? I won't mention it, but you know what I mean? That means they own the rights to the content. And I'm not doing that. This is my research, my work, right? So I'm going to publish all of my lecture series, my whole lecture series on necronetics on Parasymposia for everybody to see. We're launching, if not this month, next month, depending on what we're going to do with the content in terms of, the lecture series and everything. But that's who I am, and that's what I'm all about, man. Thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you very much, and let's stay in touch. Have a beautiful day, Nathaniel. Appreciate your research, brother.
Oh, by the way, look at the hats. We finally matched, Broseph. We finally matched.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
That's what I'm talking about.
Have a good one. Have a good one.
See ya. Thanks, everybody. Seriously, it was really nice to see y'all in the chat. Had a great group of people in the chat today. And let's do this again soon. Also, check us out over on Rumble, because we're doing live streams on Rumble. They've got pretty good freedom of speech over there. So there's some things we can talk about over there. And we're on Patreon. We've got exclusive interviews on Patreon, and you can be a Patreon for like $5. We've got thousands of hours of content on Patreon, a bunch of exclusive podcasts. I've got a bunch of interviews with Nathaniel that are exclusive to our Patreon page as well. And that helps Leak Project continue to pump out the podcasts. And on that note, folks, that was a quick shameless plug. Have a beautiful day. Be the change you want to see. Thank you.